So we currently find ourselves in a little bit of a quiet spot for Star Wars, and I don't necessarily mean the immediate short term, because we've got Skeleton Crew coming out in about 6 weeks, and early next year we've got Andor Season 2. But beyond that, we only really have to look to May 2025 to get the Mandalorian and Grogu film, and there's nothing else on the slate at the moment. And when you compare that with previous years, since 2019 and the inception of Disney Plus, we've always had projects announced. We've always had 2 to 3 projects that have been released every single year. And we typically would know the year before what was coming in the year to come. Now, we don't have that. And again, I think part of it is because Lucasfilm is kind of changing their priorities away from the streaming era, because they did really go heavy into streaming, and for better or worse, some of the shows, they were critically successful, some of them not so much. Financially successful is always hard to determine, because unlike a theatrical release where you get plain and simple box office numbers, streaming deals with subscriptions. You can't always kind of fathom whether a subscription comes from a show directly, how long that subscription stays for. So when it comes to financial success, the waters are quite muddy. But I think it's clear that Disney and Lucasfilm are aiming to kind of move back into the theatrical release style of, projects. And that will slow content down naturally as they kind of think about what they want to do. And so it got me to thinking, what is it that I want to see over the next few years from Star Wars shows, from Star Wars movies? Is there a particular story or character that I would like to see a show revolve around? And then it got me to thinking even more about what is it that we've seen seeds planted for over the last couple of years, and specifically in the last week. For those of you who aren't aware, there was a comic released last week called The Battle of Jakku, Insurgency Rising, and it was the 2nd edition. Now, obviously, the title of the comic is quite clear. It's revolving around the Battle of Jakku, that kind of last stand of the Empire, and all the people involved in it on both sides. And it gave us the first look into a character that has actually been around since about 2016. A very important character, and when I say a first look, I mean a first depiction of him. And I say he's a very important character because he is essentially the successor to the Emperor. And I'm not sure how many people are actually aware of this character. Certainly if you've not read the Aftermath novels, which again were written by Chuck Wendig and released between 2016 and 2019, you may, again, not even be aware of a lot of the story that takes place in that year between the Battle of Endor and the Battle of Jakku, which is obviously where the Emperor was killed and the Empire officially fell and surrendered. And as I say, in that year period, there is a lot that goes on, but most of it, up until recently, has only been told in those novels. Now, you might be surprised to learn that you've probably seen a lot of the kind of detailed elements of those events in other formats. If you've played Battlefront 2, then not only have you experienced the Battle of Jakku firsthand, which, by the way, you may remember seeing a Super Star Destroyer crash into the planet's surface, and you might just think that, well, that's a really cool set piece, it's a Super Star Destroyer, it looks cool because it's massive, and crashing into the planet is just an amazing kind of visual. Actually, that's a very important Super Star Destroyer, because, as I mentioned, the man who is the successor to the Emperor, that was his Super Star Destroyer. That was a Super Star Destroyer called the Ravager, and the man who was the successor was called Gallius Rax. Now, as I say, if you played Battlefront 2, you've not only experienced the Battle of Jakku firsthand, but you've also seen Operation Cinder, which he was, again, a big hand in planning and also implementing. It was part of what the Emperor called the contingency, and essentially the Emperor left this in his hands to complete. And without going into too much detail, because I don't really want to spoil all that much for you, because again, this is all great stuff that could be, flushed out into a show, and certainly if you are interested, you can go and either read the comics, or you can pick up the novels and read the story behind it. But events take place in Star Wars squadrons. We've had mentions of characters that appear in the novels in The Mandalorian, specifically in the Shadow Council. We've got Brendel Hooks, who is a character who associates with Gallius Rax. I'm thinking of his son Armitage Hooks. And again, Grand Admiral Sloane is a character some people might have seen in other, formats in different media. When you look, obviously, as well, even something as recent as Star Wars Outlaws, with the introduction of Akiva as a planet that we get to play on, that is a planet that appears in the novels. You've got Snap Wexley, who is a character involved in the novels, who would be involved in a show if that was to come about. So it feels to me like they are planting all these little seeds over the years to kind of really give us a flushed out experience for this year period, and I'd like to see it go beyond that year. I'd like to see it go into the early formation of the First Order, because again, you've got the characters, you've got the set piece, you've got the story, not to spoil too much, but when Grand Admiral Sloane travels off into the unknown regions and finds the Eclipse, the Superstar Destroyer, that's something that I would like to see them expand and, really utilize as a story point. So I do believe that we are potentially going to be getting something revolving around Gallius Rax in the near future. Now, I don't know if it's going to be an animated show. I don't know if it's going to be a live-action TV series. I don't know if it's going to be a movie. I think it's maybe a little bit too far for it to be a theatrical release. I don't think there is enough there for people to really go and buy into a theatrical release movie around, that period. I know it's Star Wars, and Star Wars should automatically, put bums in seats in the cinema, but you're not always guaranteed that. So I think maybe if it was going to be a film, it would be a direct-to-Disney Plus release with a sensible budget. I think that's the important thing for any future release, is that there has to be a sensible budget behind it for it to be viable, and we've not seen that in recent projects. But I do believe that maybe that is something that we could be getting in the immediate future, and it is a great story to tell because it involves a lot of characters that people know. It involves trips to Coruscant, it involves Mon Mothma, Grand Vizier Mas Ameda, Yup Tashu. Again, all these characters that are in the background that you've seen, and there's little bits of the story that you've experienced, you just didn't necessarily know it. And I think it would be very rewarding to see that story play out on screen. Now, it doesn't have to be an exact adaptation to the novels. We know that they're not afraid of changing events from novels to suit, a narrative, as it were. So if they decide to change some things up, I'd be all for that. But, again, that endgame, that contingency, the observatory on Jakku, the plan to obliterate the Imperial and Rebel fleets all in one go, make for a very intriguing story to read into. And again, if you want to, go and buy the Aftermath novels. I do that because they're in my bookcase back there. They are an interesting read. I know not everyone's a fan of Chuck Wendig as an author, but the stories themselves are quite interesting. And I love that era. I love that kind of chaotic year where you've got a lot of stuff going on. And there's potential there for a great space battle on screen with the Battle of Jakku. Because that's really where everything culminates. That's where the story reaches its crescendo. And I think that could translate really, really well on screen. So that's what I would like to see. That's one example of a story that I would like to see. I would like to know from you, do you think that's viable? Would you enjoy that? And if not, what would you enjoy? What would you want to see over the next few years from a Star Wars project? Is there a specific person, time period that you would like to see brought alive? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, thank you for watching. I'm hoping to have some more content out soon as we get closer to Skeleton Crew. Obviously, I'll be doing my reactions to that show. But once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.